What's up, guys? Skippy Africanus here, and welcome back to another Cards Week episode, this week featuring the 11mm Beaumont, or as it's also known, the 11x52R. I've also seen it like 11.2x52R, I think 43 Dutch. 11mm Beaumont, though. This is the caliber for the Beaumont rifles. Now, with this cartridge, we are going to be taking a different approach than we normally do. We're going to actually save the history and all that for a later video when I can get my hands on an original example. And instead, we're going to go more into this specific loading because I feel this cartridge in particular is deserving of its own video given all the stuff that it's got going on with it. And a good thing to start off with on this cartridge in particular is definitely going to be taking a look at the head stamp, which on the top, we just have the symbol for Starline Brass, the two stars with a dash in between them. That's who made the casing, and I do say casing because, of course, I loaded this myself. But on the bottom, that is where things start to get interesting. Now, it's a little bit dirty on the numbering, but I'm sure you've noticed that it reads 5090 Sharps, which, as I've mentioned, this is an 11mm Beaumont. Why does the head stamp read 5090 Sharp? And that question right there is a good way to get into this cartridge. Originally, this casing actually started off as a 5090 Sharps casing. So now when I had loaded this ammunition, the Beaumont casings were ridiculously priced. From memory, I think it was like $80 for 20 casings, and the Sharps casings were coming in at about maybe $169, something like that. It was a no-brainer. Now, I actually just looked recently, and I saw some pricing. It does seem like they started making more affordable Beaumont casings. I saw some for $40 for 20 of them. But again, when I had actually started loading for the Dutch Beaumont, it was something absurd, like $80 for 20 casings. So we, of course, took our good old 5090 casing, and we reformed it to a Beaumont casing. Which, the way that is done, now I have done this before with my Swiss Vetterli. That was a whole lot easier because I have actual dies. With the Beaumont, it was actually a very interesting task. So what you had to do was you had to cut it down to a proper size, not fully the exact overall case length because you're going to need to trim it later, but you cut it down to within reason of that size. Then you run it through 3 different sizer dies, none of which are 11mm Beaumont dies. Because for whatever reason, well, back then I couldn't find them, and I just looked again, I can't find them, so you actually run it through an 8mm Lebel die, a 4570 die, and a 45 Long Colt die in that order. Which I will tell you that especially when you get to the 45 Long Colt die, it takes a lot of muscling, and by muscling, I mean slamming. You really have to force these casings to run through them sometimes. After that, you do give it another bit, like a little bit of a trim to get it to proper length. Now, one thing is you will notice that these casings are looking a lot different than the one I have right here. That is because when you first make them, you have to fire form them, meaning you basically just have to shoot the round through the chamber, and it's going to swell up to pretty much match the interior of the chamber. So while yes, they are very ununiform, and I'm not actually sure how much that affects accuracy. That's definitely something for a future video now that I think about it. While they are ununiform, that's just something that's going to happen. Once as long as they fit in the action and they're not also too long, you're perfectly fine to fire them, and well, you have to fire them. And then they will actually come out to a more uniform shape like the one that we have here. This is, of course, loaded on a casing that was fire formed. Now, that being said, we aren't done with this particular example here. You might recall that when I showed a picture of original military ammo, it still didn't look as mean as this one. This is a pretty large round. I mean, just compared to your average 5.56 round, yeah, this thing's got some weight to it. What this is, this bullet right here, it is actually a 500 grain bullet. From memory, I think my load data was going more towards 400 grains or 350. It was one or the other. And, well, I simply played around with the load data, and I got the 500 grain bullets to work, which I should mention, the bullets are actually fairly close in diameter to the ones used for a 4570. You just need to size them down a little bit, which I will add. It also is a cool thing with reloading for this caliber is, again, 45 caliber molds, and then you just get the right sizer for your bore. And yeah, you have quite actually a good selection of bullets for this caliber. And of course, it being black powder, this also means that the bullet on top is just pure lead. It's not an alloy or anything. We are just running with a simple pure lead bullet, which, funny enough, given the obscurity of this cartridge, once you have the casings down, made and everything, and then assuming they don't crack, which hasn't really happened that often, I think I've gone through at least 4 reloads with a lot of these. Assuming you don't crack your casings, these actually are pretty cheap to load, given, again, just a pure lead bullet, and also assuming that you are casting them. Now, normally we would go into the FPSs. Unfortunately, I have not been able to actually chrono these, so maybe when we go over the official Beaumont cartridge, I'll bring this one back up, and we can take a look at what the FPS is coming with a 500 grain bullet. But I will say, though, it is pretty close to a 4570 in loading, so I imagine that it is going to be around the same FPS, if not a little bit faster, because if I remember right, this holds around 5 more grains of black powder versus standard 4570. But anyways, I think that's going to do it for this week's Cards Week episode featuring the modern-produced Beaumont ammunition. I hope you all enjoyed the video as much as I personally enjoyed making it. I will see y'all next time.